The first time I caught her standing at the edge of my backyard with a measuring tape and an iPad, I figured it was just a nosy neighbor being. Well, nosy. But when she came back the next morning with two other HOA board members and a clipboard, I knew something was up. "I'm telling you, this fence is 5 feet into HOA-maintained property," she declared, waving her tablet like it was a badge. Her name was Deborah Kinley, mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, and the president of the Maple Grove Estates HOA. She always wore pastel cardigans like a uniform and spoke like she was delivering a sermon. The kind of woman who called the cops because your grass was half an inch too tall. I stepped outside and crossed my arms. "Deborah, that fence has been there since I bought the place." "You think I built it to spite your precious flower beds?" She turned, all fake smiles. "Mr. Vaughn, the association simply wants to maintain the integrity of our property lines. We'll be issuing a notice of encroachment. You'll need to remove the fence by Friday." "My name's Holden," I said, not that she cared. I was just the latest target. Ever since I moved in 5 months ago, she'd been on me for everything: trash cans not hidden fast enough, mailbox color not compliant, and now apparently my backyard was a threat to national security. I didn't budge. "You're wrong, Deborah. That land's mine. I've got the deed to prove it." She gave a sharp laugh like I'd told a joke. "Well, we'll see what the county has to say. I have GPS coordinates and satellite images that say otherwise." I didn't say another word. I just went back inside and pulled the folder from my file cabinet. Deed, plat map, survey, everything the title company gave me when I closed on the house. I even had the original subdivision plans from the county clerk's office. I wasn't about to get pushed around by a woman who thought being on the HOA board gave her divine authority. By the next week, Deborah had mailed me 3 violation notices, each more dramatic than the last. The final one even said they were fining me $100 a day until the fence was removed. I didn't pay a dime. 2 days later, I came home from work to find a contractor sawing through my fence. "Hey," I ran over. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The guy looked startled. "Lady from the HOA said this was unauthorized construction, said I was hired to tear it down." "You touch another board," I warned, "and you're the one getting sued." He backed off, but the damage was done. 20 feet of my fence was gone, and I had a family of raccoons partying in my backyard by midnight. That was when I decided to go nuclear. I filed for an emergency injunction the next morning and walked it straight into the county courthouse. The clerk looked surprised when I pulled out the full-size plat map and pointed to the boundary lines. "Let me guess," she said. "Maple Grove Estates? You've seen this before?" I asked. "Deborah Kinley's tried this with 3 other homeowners. But nobody's ever brought in this much documentation." I grinned. Well, she picked the wrong neighbor this time. I sat in the courtroom, suit pressed and documents neatly arranged in a binder I'd labeled Exhibit A, proof of ownership. The judge hadn't even called us yet, but Deborah was already 2 rows behind me, whispering furiously to a man in a tan sports coat. He looked like a lawyer, but the way he kept checking his phone and avoiding eye contact told me he wasn't thrilled to be here. When our case was finally called, I walked up with my binder under one arm and a county surveyor's signed affidavit in the other. Deborah strutted up like she owned the place, heels clacking on the tile, waving a printed Google Maps screenshot like it was a smoking gun. Judge Halston was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who didn't care for theatrics. She adjusted her glasses, looked at both of us, and said, "Let's be clear. This is a property dispute, not a talent show. Mr. Vaughn, you're filing for an injunction and damages. Miss Kinley, you're here representing Maple Grove Estates HOA. Let's hear facts. Start with the plaintiff." I opened the binder and laid out the timeline. Purchase date, boundary lines, the original subdivision plat filed with the county, and the recent certified survey confirming the fence sat entirely within my property. I slid the affidavit toward the bench. Judge Halston skimmed it, nodded once, and turned to Deborah. "Your response?" Deborah held up her GPS images. Your Honor, these show the fence is several feet beyond the regulated limit. Our association has satellite data and we've been tasked with protecting community land. This man has encroached. The judge raised a brow. Your evidence is a Google satellite image. Deborah didn't flinch. With coordinate overlays, we consulted with a contractor who verified the placement. Is that contractor licensed to conduct land surveys? Deborah hesitated. He does landscaping and grading. He's familiar with property lines. Judge Halston set the paper down like it had personally insulted her. That's not how property boundaries are determined in the state of Georgia. You'd know that if you'd bothered to check with the county assessor's office before authorizing demolition of private property. Deborah's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And you did authorize it, correct? The judge asked, flipping to the signed HOA directive I had included in my filing. Her lawyer finally spoke. We'd like to dispute the validity of the directive, save it, Judge Halston cut in. There's a notarized signature from your client on a document instructing the removal of a fence. That's destruction of private property. And now you're telling me you based it on landscaping guesswork and internet screenshots. Deborah's eyes narrowed. With all due respect, Maple Grove Estates has rules. You're not above the law, the judge snapped, and you may have just committed fraud. That was the moment she paled. The judge turned to me. Mr. Vaughn, I'm granting your injunction. Your property line is confirmed. You'll receive reimbursement for damages plus court costs. If you wish to pursue a civil suit for trespass and destruction of property, you'll have legal standing. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. I've already filed a police report regarding the unauthorized demolition. Good, she said. Because based on this evidence, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for review. Miss Kinley, you may want to retain criminal counsel. The courtroom was dead silent. Deborah didn't speak another word. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered something, and she just stared ahead, lips pressed into a line. By the time I left the courthouse, my phone was buzzing with messages. Apparently, word had already spread. My neighbor Maria, who ran the Neighborhood Watch Facebook group, sent a photo of Deborah leaving the building with a sheriff's investigator beside her. I wasn't surprised. I'd left no stone unturned. After the fence incident, I'd gone through every HOA communication Deborah had sent me since I moved in. What I found was worse than I expected. She'd altered the original HOA boundary maps and distributed them in newsletters claiming they were updated, when in fact, they'd been edited using a basic image editor. I found the metadata embedded in the files. The originals from the county didn't match. She had manipulated the maps to give the illusion that HOA land extended several feet beyond the actual boundaries, enough for her to claim parts of my yard, and several others were on community-managed space. I compiled everything. Emails, digital files, timestamps, and a statement from the county planning office confirming no boundary changes had ever been filed. That night, I received another call, this time from Officer Lane, the detective assigned to the case. We've reviewed your documents, he said. I've spoken to the county recorder's office and they confirmed your boundaries are legitimate. We also interviewed the contractor who tore down your fence. He gave us a copy of the work order with Deborah Kinley's signature. Is forgery a possibility? I asked. No, he said. She signed it herself. And considering she presented falsified maps to multiple homeowners and used those to justify property destruction, we're opening a fraud investigation. There may be additional charges depending on what else we find. I hung up feeling more vindicated than I'd expected. But I wasn't done yet. Over the next week, I spoke with 6 other neighbors who'd received similar notices from the HOA. Some had already paid fines. One elderly couple, the DeLucas, had actually torn down a shed after Deborah claimed it was on easement space. I walked them through the same process I'd followed, even helped them request plat maps from the county. Turns out their shed, like my fence, sat neatly within their lot lines. I helped them draft a joint letter and filed a secondary complaint with the State Homeowners Association Oversight Board. Then, I requested a special meeting with the HOA open to all residents. To my surprise, they granted it. The meeting was held in the community center on a rainy Thursday evening. I arrived early and set up a projector. By the time it started, over 40 residents had shown up. Deborah sat stiffly at the front, flanked by 2 remaining board members who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. I took the podium. "Thanks for coming. I'm Holden Vaughn, Lot 74. I'd like to begin by showing you the original county subdivision map filed in 2006. I clicked to the next slide. Now here's the version distributed by the HOA last quarter. Notice anything? Gasps and muttered curses filled the air as property lines shifted like magic in the altered map. I zoomed in on a few lots: mine, the DeLucas, the Garcias. All had been targeted. All had lost something. Here's confirmation from the county that no boundary changes have ever been filed. And here's the digital signature metadata showing these maps were edited on Miss Kinley's personal computer. She lied to us, someone muttered. Not just lied, I said. She used falsified documents to fine homeowners, demolish property, and intimidate residents into compliance. That's fraud, and it's now a criminal investigation. Deborah stood abruptly, knocking her chair over. You're turning this into a witch hunt. No, I said. You did that when you decided your power was worth more than your integrity. The room erupted. People shouted questions. Others demanded her removal. Deborah tried to shout over them, but her voice was drowned out in the chaos. One of the board members quietly picked up her purse and walked out. By the end of the night, we'd voted to suspend the current board and appoint an interim committee to oversee operations while the investigation unfolded. The next morning, Channel 7 parked a van outside the community gates. Deborah's face was on the evening news. Not for her Garden Club awards or her micromanaging newsletter, but for fraud, destruction of property, and abuse of authority. She resigned 3 days later. Not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. The DA had officially filed charges. And just like that, the pastel tyrant of Maple Grove Estates was dethroned. The week after Deborah's resignation wasn't quiet. In fact, the neighborhood felt like it had been cracked open. For the first time since I moved in, people were talking to each other on the sidewalks, not just polite nods or complaints about garbage pickup, but real conversations. The kind that started with, "Did you know she tried to fine my teenager for parking too close to the curb?" and ended with someone pulling out their phone to show a bizarre email from the HOA's compliance team. I wasn't planning to dig deeper. I had my fence rebuilt and figured the fallout would take care of itself. But then I got a call from an accountant named Jared Tran, who lived on the far end of the neighborhood. I didn't know him. He said he'd heard about the meeting from a coworker who lived in the next cul-de-sac. "Something's off with the HOA's finances," he said. "If you've got time, I'd like to show you." I met him at his house that evening. His living room was covered in spreadsheets, receipts, and photocopies of checks. He'd requested the HOA's financial disclosures under the Georgia HOA Transparency Act. Took him 3 months and a certified letter to get them. He pointed at a ledger. "Look at this landscaping contract from last year. Paid out $27,000 for median maintenance. But I walk my dog past that strip every day. The only thing they did was mulch it once and trim the hedges." I leaned closer. The check was made out to a company named Green Spire Services. I didn't recognize it. Jared pulled up the Georgia Secretary of State's business database on his laptop and typed in the name. It was registered to a woman named Lynette Kinley, Deborah's sister-in-law. We both sat back. "That's embezzlement," I said. "It gets worse," Jared replied. Same company is listed on 5 more contracts: street lighting, irrigation repair, tree removal. All overpriced, all with invoices that look off. He showed me one invoice dated during the ice storm last winter. The neighborhood had lost power for 2 days. The invoice claimed Green Spire replaced 12 lamp posts during that time while the roads were closed. I took photos of everything. Jared handed me a flash drive with the files. "I've already sent copies to the county fraud unit," he said. "But I figured you'd know how to get people to pay attention." He was right. The next morning, I requested an emergency oversight hearing with the interim HOA committee. They were 5 homeowners who'd stepped up after Deborah resigned. None of them had ever served on a board before, but they were determined to clean house. We met in the community clubhouse. I laid out the documents, the check images, the business registration forms, and Jared's analysis. "Every contract over $15,000 requires 3 competitive bids," I said. "There are no bids on file." These were no bid payouts to a company run by Deborah's family member for work that doesn't appear to have been done or was wildly overcharged. One of the interim members, a retired Navy engineer named Scott, let out a low whistle. "This isn't just a little kickback. This is structured fraud." I nodded. "And if the HOA used homeowner dues to funnel money to a sham contractor, that's felony-level stuff." They voted unanimously to authorize a full forensic audit. I gave them Jared's contact info, and they brought in a CPA certified in nonprofit investigations. 2 days later, the police were back in the neighborhood. Detective Lane called me again. "You really know how to stir things up," he said. "We executed a search warrant this morning on Green Spire's business address. It's a UPS store box." "Figured as much," I said. "Any trace of actual operations?" "None. No equipment, no staff, no bank records outside the checks from your HOA." The DA just added felony theft by deception to the charges against Deborah Kinley. The next week, subpoenas went out to every board member who had served under Deborah in the last 3 years. 2 of them lawyered up immediately. One turned over a thumb drive full of meeting minutes that had never been shared with residents' minutes that included off-the-record votes, skipped maintenance schedules, and one particularly damning entry about increasing dues quietly to cover unexpected contractor costs. The DA convened a grand jury. Meanwhile, the community transformed. People were furious not just over the money, but over the years of petty fines, threats, and surveillance. One woman found out she'd paid a $400 tree trimming violation because Deborah claimed her crepe myrtle was obstructing the sidewalk. It wasn't. There wasn't even a sidewalk. The interim board held a town hall to explain everything. I stood at the back. Jared was beside me, arms crossed, watching as people listened to the audit results. "Over 67,000 in questionable disbursements," the CPA announced. "No competitive bidding, no fulfillment verification, and no authorization from the board in several cases." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Are we getting that money back?" The CPA hesitated. "That depends on the outcome of the criminal case, but restitution is likely." People cheered. The next morning, TV crews were back. A reporter caught me as I was getting my mail. "You're the one who brought the deed to court, right?" she asked. "That's how it started," I said. "But this was never just about a fence. It was about someone who thought she could use a position of trust to control and exploit people." And she got caught. By the end of the month, Deborah's mugshot was on every local news channel. The final list of charges included property fraud, destruction of private structures, grand theft, falsifying public documents, and violation of public trust. The DA confirmed they had enough to go to trial. What surprised everyone was the plea deal. 3 former board members agreed to testify against her in exchange for immunity. One of them turned over an audio recording of a meeting Deborah thought was off the record. On it, she said, "These people are too lazy to check the math. We control the narrative." It played on the 6 o'clock news. She pled guilty 2 weeks later. Her sentence included 2 years in county jail, 5 years probation, and a restitution order for every homeowner affected by the fraud. She was also barred from serving on any HOA or nonprofit board for life. I received a check in the mail for the cost of rebuilding my fence. The DeLucas got theirs for the shed they tore down. Jared and I helped the interim board draft new bylaws. including mandatory third-party reviews of all financial decisions over $5,000 and a permanent transparency portal online. At the next community meeting, someone made a motion to name the clubhouse after me. I declined. "This isn't about recognition," I said. "It's about making sure no one like her ever gets that kind of power here again." The room applauded anyway. That night, I walked past the rebuilt fence now sealed with steel posts and a small plaque reading "Survey Verified, 2023. A quiet joke between me and the surveyor who helped me. The raccoons had since moved on. So had the fear that someone could just take what was mine because they thought they could. Maple Grove Estates was still a neighborhood with rules. But now, the rules worked both ways, and the people enforcing them answered to everyone, not just the loudest woman in a cardigan. The first HOA election following the fallout drew more votes than any in Maple Grove Estates history. Ballots were dropped off, mailed in, and hand-delivered like it was a presidential race. The community had been shaken awake, and nobody wanted to let the ghosts of Deborah's regime crawl back through the cracks. I didn't run for the board. I never had any desire to be in charge. But I did attend every policy meeting that spring, sitting in the back with a notepad while the newly elected board, 3 engineers, a retired judge, and a school principal rewrote nearly every clause in the association's governing documents. I offered advice where I could, mostly on reinforcing transparency and requiring legal review of any enforcement action involving private property. By early summer, the neighborhood had settled into a rhythm again, just without the fear. People started hosting driveway cookouts. Kids rode scooters down the sidewalks without someone snapping photos of them for safety reports. A group of residents even organized a weekend gardening club, not because they were required to, but because they enjoyed it. Then came the subpoena. It arrived in a plain envelope with the state seal in the corner, delivered to my mailbox by a deputy marshal. Inside was a notice to appear before a state grand jury. Not for Deborah's case, she had already been sentenced and was serving her time. This was something new, something bigger. I stared at the letter for a long minute before driving straight to the office of the assistant district attorney, a woman named Priya Menon, who had led the initial investigation against Deborah. "More fallout?" I asked as she greeted me in the lobby. She nodded solemnly. "We're opening a racketeering case, multiple HOAs across the county. We believe Maple Grove Estates was used as a pilot site." I raised my eyebrows. "A pilot for what?" She led me to a whiteboard in her office. It was covered in names, dates, and arrows connecting a web of businesses and neighborhood associations. At the center was a name I hadn't seen before: Nalan Keene. "He's the common thread," Priya explained. "He served on the board of 3 different HOAs over the last 10 years. Each one saw inflated contracts awarded to shell companies, just like Green Spire. We believe he coordinated the schemes and recruited others to carry them out, people like Deborah." I leaned closer, scanning the companies listed. None of them had websites. All had addresses tied to mail drops or P.O. boxes. One of them, Sunridge Maintenance, had been paid nearly $90,000 over 2 years by a subdivision only 5 miles from ours. Priya handed me a copy of a signed email Deborah had sent to someone at Sunridge Maintenance. The recipient, Nalan Keene. "She referred to him as her procurement liaison," Priya said. "We think he coached her through the scheme: how to forge bid records, how to falsify maintenance logs, even how to handle complaints." I looked down at the subpoena again. "You think I can help blow this open?" "You already did," she said. "Your case gave us the legal precedent we needed to dig deeper. We just need your testimony to complete the chain. You're one of the few who pushed back with actual documentation." The grand jury session took place in a secure wing of the county courthouse, 2 floors above where I'd first faced Deborah months earlier. This time, the stakes were higher. We weren't talking about one HOA president overstepping her authority. We were talking about a coordinated operation siphoning hundreds of thousands in homeowner dues across multiple communities. I spent 3 hours answering questions. The jurors asked about how I discovered the altered maps, what tools I used to trace the metadata, and how I verified the boundaries. They were particularly interested in the pattern of escalation, the way the HOA had used fear and confusion to pressure compliance. One juror, a woman with a navy sweater and a legal pad full of notes, asked something that stuck with me. "Why do you think so many people went along with it?" I paused. "Because they thought fighting back would cost more than giving in." And in a lot of neighborhoods, it probably did. A week later, the indictments dropped. 32 counts of racketeering, 15 counts of wire fraud, and a half-dozen accessory charges. Nolan Keene was arrested at his lake house in Tennessee. Alongside him were 4 other individuals tied to vendor companies that had served as fronts for the operation. Each one had ties to at least one HOA in our county. The state attorney general held a press conference announcing the charges. He called it the largest coordinated HOA fraud racket in state history. And he credited the case to a group of concerned residents who refused to be bullied by bad governance. That fall, the state legislature passed a bill requiring mandatory third-party audits for any HOA with annual budgets over $50,000. All enforcement actions now had to be reviewed by a certified compliance officer unaffiliated with the board. The law was nicknamed the Maple Grove Act. The community threw a block party to celebrate. Someone made cupcakes with little edible survey flags on top. Kids drew chalk outlines of fake fences on the sidewalks. For the first time, it felt like we weren't just recovering, we were thriving. A few weeks later, I got a knock on my door. It was the DeLucas, the couple I'd helped with the shed issue months earlier. They were holding a bottle of bourbon and a small wooden box. "We wanted to thank you," Mr. DeLuca said, handing me the box. "You didn't just help us, you helped everyone." Inside was a custom engraved compass. On the back it read, "For always knowing where the line is and standing on it." I was speechless for a moment, then I nodded and invited them in. Later that night, I walked the neighborhood. The street lamps, real ones this time, lit up the sidewalks evenly. Porch lights glowed warmly. I passed a group of teenagers tossing a football in a front yard and waved. They waved back. No one was hiding anymore. No one was afraid to speak up. The land was quiet, the air still. The fence was exactly where it belonged, and so was I.